April Fools. Dave Borges covers my goodness, the sledgehammer of UConn. What a run they're on with Hurley, a company. They are just mauling people. Dave, thanks for your time. Appreciate it as well. Have you been hit with any April Fools today at all?
Yeah, my son told me he got cut from his middle school baseball team, and it turned out to be an April Fool's joke. So, yeah, he got me for a little bit.
All right, so UConn is just wreaking havoc on the tournament. Obviously, the Final Four coming back. Alabama coming up. Alabama can put it up with anybody as far as the points, but UConn is just mauling people. We've discussed this with you even last week, and they just keep killing people on the court. Your thoughts about why they're good, they're the defending champions, but this is getting almost silly?
Well, because they have the number one offense in the country per Ken Palm rankings, if you go by those, and number 4 defense, and that's a pretty lethal combination. There's no other team that has 2 in the top 10, I believe, or certainly not the top 5. They can beat you in so many ways. They have great depth in their starting lineup. All 5 guys average in double figures. They have guys coming off the bench who are could start for a lot of other teams. They have 3-point shooters. They have monsters in the middle. They have athletes, and then defensively, again, they have the 7'2" Donovan Kling in the middle, who changes the scope of every game he plays in. But they also have real good on-the-ball defenders on the perimeter. So, and they're very well coached. There's just not a lot of weaknesses there.
They went on a 30-0 run the other night in the Elite Eight, which just does not happen all that often, especially when you're playing in the Elite Eight. This wasn't some early season warm-up game. This was, as close as it gets. So when did you think the run would end? Did you, watching Illinois, did you think, well, eventually they got to do this before it gets to this point? When it got to 30-0, I was flabbergasted.
Yeah, going in, everybody, myself included, thought Illinois might be their toughest challenge, certainly to date, and maybe even ultimately in the entire tournament. And it was a tie game with less than 2 minutes to go in the first half. And UConn scored the last 5 of the second half, but you're thinking this is a tight game and could go down to the wire, or at least be the first NCAA tournament game UConn wins by fewer than 10 points in a while. And then all of a sudden, 25-0 start to the second half. It got ridiculous after a while. And again, that's not only the great offense, but the great defense as well. I was convinced Illinois was going to score at some point, and then ultimately they did.
Dave, a lot of attention being paid to the head coach and just kind of his eccentricities and some of his comments there in the post-game presser, and just obviously a lot of attention right now on Dan Hurley and the Huskies. But what's it like to cover him and press conferences, and just how would you describe his personality and kind of what that's like riding along the whole time?
Yeah, he's unique. He's been that way ever since he got here. He's been with the superstitions and the idiosyncrasies, and we've been dealing with those for the past 6 years, and it's now becoming a little more well-known on the national level. But, and the things he finds to motivate his team, the slights and the perceived snubs that the team gets that he uses, I'm not even sure he believes half of them. I mean, complaining that the committee really didn't treat them well as the number 1 seed, even though they were playing in Brooklyn and Boston, and he complains about the Big East schedule throughout the season, saying that they play too many teams that have an extra day's rest before they play UConn. Stuff like that. It's like, I don't think he even believes half of these things, but he's got a chip on his shoulder, and he uses it to motivate his team, and his team's got a chip on his shoulder. And I guess you kind of have to continue to find those things, because you don't want to get complacent when you're winning all these blowouts.
So do they play like he coaches, or the personality of him?
Yeah, I would say so. Not everybody. I mean, Cam Spencer is their shooting guard, and he's just like Hurley in his intensity and his fire, and he's picked up a few technicals, yelling at fans and things like that. But then again, Tristan Newton, the sort of the point guard, is a laid-back guy from El Paso, Texas, who doesn't really show a whole lot of emotion. Stephon Castle, the freshman, is kind of similar. So it's not like they all have the same personality, but they all have that edge. They all have they all love basketball. They all are care about playing for each other as opposed to NIL stuff and draft pick, for becoming a lot one and done pick, stuff like that. So they have that. So he's really infused that into the team. So even though they don't have the same manic personalities, they all have the same drive and desire to win.
Dave, they have been so in control in the tournament. Has there been a single moment where you thought, oh, they're playing sloppy?
Sloppy? Yeah. I'm trying to think of this particular tournament. I mean, not really. Again, they did against Illinois. They were up 9-0 to start the game, and then by near the halftime it was a 23-23 game. So they kind of, actually, to be honest with you, their 3-point shooting the last couple of games has not been very good. If there's something to criticize, it's that. Now they've just been able to pound it down low to Donovan Clingan and beat teams out in transition. So it hasn't really played a major factor, obviously. But I guess if to sort of answer your question, the one thing they'd like to tidy up a little bit is their 3-point shooting. Because I think they were 3 for 17 the other night, and they had a couple of subpar shooting nights in Brooklyn as well. So that's one thing they need to clean up a little bit.
Dave, Alabama can fill it up. They have scored a bunch of points, and they are not afraid to throw it up. But we had Rob Douster from the Field of 68 on earlier. He said he thinks Alabama at least might try to shoot about 53s and hope they hit about 20 of them. They have faced UConn dudes and teams that can fill it up, Creighton, among others. Gonzaga, I know they played Gonzaga. What is Alabama? Who do they remind you of a couple of teams other than maybe the ones I've mentioned that UConn has played?
That UConn has played. I was going to say Kentucky because they're kind of an all offense, no defense type of deal. But UConn didn't play Kentucky this year. Hard to say. They're kind of unique in the sense that, like you said, I think they were. Did they lead the nation or second or third in the nation in 3-point attempts, and they shoot it at a pretty good clip. And so, Nate Oates is all about the metrics of 3-pointers or layups and dunks and nothing in between. And trying to think if there's a Big East team that's really like that. Creighton Creighton a little bit. But Creighton kind of tightened up its defense a little bit this year, and they have a 7-footer inside that can play Clingan pretty well. Yeah, I would just say that I think UConn knows what they're in for. Nate Oates and Dan Hurley are very close. So there's not going to be too many surprises. And I wouldn't doubt that they're going to just fire up from 3. And because that might be the only way that you can beat UConn is just get real hot from 3 or even just throw up a million of them and hope, like you said, maybe 15, 20 of them fall.
Well, the one thing about that is if some of them fall, then that's probably their chance. At the same time, if they don't have a good night shooting, it could be another one of these crazy blowouts. I don't know if that's going to happen. But UConn's defense against the 3, Illinois, weren't they the number 1 offensive team in America? And had them like bludgeoned throughout that game.
Yeah. Well, again, Donovan Clingan changes everything when he's in. He forces teams to take shots they might not want to. He forces them to take maybe more threes than they want to. Now you can't. Alabama can't shoot enough threes. So, but the perimeter defense, Stephon Castle, the freshman, he's going to probably be an NBA lottery pick in a few months, and it's because largely right now it's because he's a 6'6" guard who can defend and he's very athletic. So he's an excellent on the ball defender. Then he goes to the bench and they bring in a guy named Hassan Diarra who is even more of a pest in terms of defensively. So they can shut down your guards. They can shut down the bigs with slinging inside with his substitute, Samson Johnson, who's a 6'10" jumping jack athlete. So that's why they're so good defensively, and that's why it's hard to see teams beating them, or even just kind of like putting up big offensive numbers against them. But I think that's what Alabama's best shot is.
Dave, thanks for your time. UConn trying to join NC State with both men and women in the Final Four. NC State doing that because of the run with DJ Burns. And then also the women beating Texas yesterday and getting on top of them at halftime by a dozen and then winning by 7, 8, 9, 10 points or whatever. They controlled that game. Meanwhile, UConn is 30th out of 351 teams for three-point defense. So that's really good if you think about, again, football there's 115, basketball there's 350, maybe 3, and they're 30th in the country in three-point defense. So that will be interesting to see how Alabama shoots it against them coming up this next weekend.
That 30-0